The smell of sweet revenge is in the air as the Colts travel to Nashville to give the Tennessee Titans some payback this Sunday. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you, friends and family, for tuning in and making us your number one listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is Jake Arthur alongside Zach Hicks. You know the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com. And if you haven't already checked it out, Zach had a really nice piece today on the Colts carrying over their passing game success that they found last week with the offensive line and everything. So make sure you guys check that out if you haven't already. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today we're going to go all over this Colts matchup with the Titans for Sunday. What's going to happen on offense, if the defense can rebound, and what our final predictions will be. So, Zach, offensively, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm thinking that the Colts, I think things line up fairly well for the Colts offense in this one. I mean, they're coming off such a great game on offense against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It looks like all their guys are going to be healthy. I mean, Nyheim Hines is looking good for playing. Jonathan Taylor is looking good. Offensive line's at full strength. The other pass catchers, after having a great week a week ago, none of them ended up on the injury report. So I think things are lining up. And this Titans defense, I kind of put in that article that you mentioned there, statistically, they're not as good as the Jaguars defense, which the Colts just had a lot of success with. Now, yes, the Titans have more star power on their defense. They have Kevin Byard. They have Jeffrey Simmons. I think Bud Dupree is going to play in this one. So they do have a lot of talent. Danico Autry is another one I could throw in there. They have a lot of talent on that defense, but they've been very inconsistent this year. As I mentioned in the article, they're ninth in passing yards allowed this season. And that's with them having a bye week. So I think if you do that on like a per game thing or whatever, they're like second or third most passing yards allowed. They're allowing over I think 67% of quarterbacks against them are completing 67% of their passes. They're having a lot of success over the middle of the field, which what the Colts just did a lot of against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think this Colts passing game can kind of carry over the success they had against the Jaguars into this matchup against the Titans. It really just comes down to this offensive line yet again, and I feel good about Dennis Kelly. I'm a little bit scared of Matt Pryor on Jeffrey Simmons, just a little bit.
You're a lot of bit scared of that, as we all should be.
Yes.
No, I think you're right. If the offensive line steps up and is somewhat reminiscent of what they did last week, then it could follow a similar script to what the Colts did against the Jaguars. Tennessee's run defense is much better on paper, at least statistically, than what this matchup even looked like just a few weeks ago, even though they did shut the Colts run game down pretty well. But Tennessee is, they're dead last in pass defense, like you said, 287.6 yards per game, but they're now fifth against the run. So, just looking at that, again, that could be the Colts recipe once again, even though you have Jonathan Taylor maybe back, Nyheim Hines maybe back. Shoot, all three running backs are banged up right now, but all three look optimistic for Sunday. One thing that kind of worries me a little bit about Tennessee is they are second on third downs, so they tend to get that defense off the field in those money downs. We've seen proof from that Week 4 game. They're able to harass the backfield. They got to the Colts, I think, only 3 times in that game, but it felt like a lot more. So that still worries me as well. So that's kind of the biggest theme I'm looking at. Are there any particular position groups you're looking for that you think the Colts might either really struggle or be able to take advantage of Tennessee's defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about mismatches that hurt the Colts, I think Jeffrey Simmons versus Matt Pryor is one of the biggest mismatches in this entire game. that's going to be a brutal one because even though the Colts offense and their offensive line looked really good last week, Matt Pryor still struggled at right guard.
They're still a weak link, yeah.
Right. But the other one is, Quentin Nelson, like we talked about after last time these two teams played. Quentin Nelson's always struggled against Danico Autry. Danico Autry, for some reason, is the one guy that Quentin Nelson just cannot block one-on-one. Like, he just gets beat healthy, like very, very easily by Danico Autry at times. And we saw that in that week 4 game. Danico Autry had 2 sacks. At least on one of them, he very cleanly beat Quentin Nelson.
Oh, he blew past him, yeah.
Right. So I do think those are 2 mismatches for the Colts where both their guards need to step up and at least be, adequate throughout this whole game. But I think something that benefits the Colts is their receivers right now are playing really, really good football. Alec Pierce is playing some phenomenal football in recent weeks. Michael Pittman Jr. looked like a true alpha last week. Paris Campbell looked awesome against the Jaguars. This really talented wide receiver group is rolling into this game against the Titans, against a secondary and cornerback group that's really kind of underwhelmed. Caleb Farley, I know, has had a lot of struggles this season. Christian Fulton's been pretty solid, but he's up and down a little bit. And then I think Roger McCreary's kind of been a little up and down as well in the slot. I do think that this Colts wide receiver group can have a pretty big game against this Titans secondary. And then also the Colts tight ends. The Colts tight ends against them last time had nearly 200 yards receiving. So you got to hope that success carries into this one as well. So I do think the Colts can throw the ball effectively in this matchup. It just really comes down to the offensive line. And if Quentin Nelson can block Danico Autry, if Matt Pryor can block Jeffrey Simmons, if Dennis Kelly can handle Bud Dupree off the edge, there's going to be a lot of ifs there. But I do think the Colts passing game can keep this up. Now, I don't want to jinx it, but I do think that they can keep it up.
Yeah, and speaking of the passing game, I'm going to kind of parlay that into who will be my X factor in this one. That's Jelani Woods. He just keeps ascending. He's getting better. They're targeting him more often. It was Mo Alley-Cox that had the huge game in week 4 against the Titans. I think it was 6 catches, 85 yards, and a pair of touchdowns. But he's been non-existent ever since. Meanwhile, Kylan Granson and Jelani Woods just keep moving up. And Woods is just his touchdown per catch ratio is just going to be bonkers by the end of the year. So it feels like a stretch to say Mo Alley-Cox is going to duplicate it because we just haven't seen them try and make that happen this year. So I'm more willing to say Jelani Woods is going to be the guy that's going to make Tennessee's, sit in between those safeties and linebackers. I think he's going to be the one that kind of makes him pay a little bit.
Yeah. And for my X factor, I'm going to go with a running back, actually, even though we're just talking about the passing game throughout this whole segment. I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor. I mean, Jonathan Taylor looks like he's in line to play this week. He's had full practices all week. They said reportedly he was really close to playing this past week, but he kind of pulled himself out before the game started due to just not feeling super comfortable with that ankle. But, Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he has not looked like it this year, but he is one of the best running backs in all of football. And we have not seen him do those Jonathan Taylor great things yet this season. Now he's coming off of, 2 weeks of rest where he got to kind of relax a little bit. The Colts offensive line is looking a little bit better. We saw a little bit more run lanes the last 2 weeks than what we saw in week 4 against the Titans. So I do think this is lining up for maybe not like a 200-yard game for Jonathan Taylor, but just a solid bounce-back game. And if he can get some of those dump-off passes that Deion Jackson was getting last week, he can turn. If Deion Jackson has turned those into 20-yard gains, what can Jonathan Taylor do with those little swing passes and little dump-offs? So I think this is lining up for a good Jonathan Taylor game, even if it's not 100% on the ground and not, 200 yards. I do think Jonathan Taylor's going to have a nice little bounce back after his 2 weeks of rest and his poor performance in week 4 against the Titans.
Oh, yeah. I think everyone would absolutely welcome that. He's really only had that one big game this year, week 1 against Houston. But otherwise, it's been tough sledding. Him trying to navigate the blocking and everything just hasn't looked comfortable. So, we just talked about what the Colts can do against Tennessee's defense. We think it might be a little reminiscent of last week, more reliant on the passing game. Before we get to the defensive side of the ball, let's go ahead and talk to you about one of our newest sponsors, Simply Safe. Here are 3 of my favorite things: football, and saving money. So let's talk about saving big money right now with Simply Safe Home Security. They're offering Locked On Colts listeners, that's you guys, 40% off their advanced security system. Simply Safe was just named the best home security of 2022 by US News. They love it. I love it. You'll love it. Because at Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. Personally, I began looking into Simply Safe when they came on as a sponsor, but I'd actually been thinking of it for even longer. I'm sure we've all heard commercials for them before if you listen to any podcast. I live in a decent area, but I do have a family at the end of the day, and their well-being is priority number one for me. Being able to keep track of things from my phone and get instant alerts about the camera or motion stuff is a big selling point personally. Plus, with how clear the camera is, you don't have to feel like you're watching one of those crime shows with the grainy CCTV footage. Just like Stephon Gilmore in coverage, Simply Safe blankets your home with protection. They use advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. There are HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, which are smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is actually real. They even have hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl. Go today. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, Zach. Tennessee's offense, very one-dimensional right now. Very one-dimensional. Their offense overall is 31st. Their passing game just isn't there. It's pretty much Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill rolling out, doing a couple things with his legs, finding some open guys. But obviously, if you can contain Derrick Henry to a certain extent, then you have an outstanding chance of winning this game. That was easier said than done back in week 4. Henry had 114 yards rushing, 33 receiving. Probably would have had a much better day receiving if he wouldn't have dropped a couple balls. But that was primarily in the first half. He did most of his damage. The Colts kind of settled in the second half. But, man, what do you think is the recipe for this one?
Yeah, the Titans are kind of like a very fascinating offense this year where, the first half offense is actually decent. Their first half offense is pretty solid. They run the ball well in the first half. They get that play action game going. But it seems to always just fall apart in the second half. They just cannot close out games with this offense. And we saw that back in week 4 against the Colts where the Titans had 24 points before halftime and they barely moved the ball in the second half. I mean, I think they had like 30 yards of offense in the second half of that game. It's always a tale of two halves with this Titans team, especially with their offense. Their run game is something to be scared of because we just saw the Colts against a Jacksonville Jaguars team that is not nearly as good at running the ball. They don't have Derrick Henry. I mean, Travis Etienne is a very solid back, and same with James Robinson. Very, very solid backs, but they're not Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is an animal, and he really made the Colts pay in the first half of that week 4 game. So I do think the Colts need to be a lot tighter with their run fits. They need to not be as over aggressive when it comes to that misdirection and stuff, because that's what the Jaguars were really killing them with. It was with that misdirection. It was with those toss plays and those sweep plays, and that's what the Titans want to do now. They're not a power run football team anymore. They're not run behind Roger Saffold and pull a guard. They are pure toss plays and sweep plays, outside zone runs, because they have this smaller, quicker offensive line now. So you're going to see a lot of that from the Titans, and I think they're going to find some success. It's just about limiting that success, not making sure that Derrick Henry doesn't break off those 30, 40, 50-yard runs, containing them to maybe even like a 5 or 10-yard run. Like, that's kind of fine. Just kind of keep it all contained. Make them have to go the length of the field on you methodically, because their offense, when they have to pass, has not been very good. And then you obviously want to get them into 3rd and long situations, because their offensive line is one of the worst in the NFL at pass blocking. I know both their tackle situations are really bad right now. Dennis Daly really struggled against Washington the last time they played. And same with Nicholas Petit-Frere at right tackle. Aaron Brewer really struggled at left guard, that 270-pound guard. So there is some ways to beat this Titans offense. You just got to get them you have to get them off track, guys. That's what I was trying to say. Get them off track, knock them back, get those 3rd and 6s, 7s, 8s, and then you got to just have containment on your pass rush lanes, because Ryan Tannehill will beat you with his legs if you don't contain those rushings, which we did see back in week 4. But all this word salad, I know it's my favorite thing to say this week, but all this word salad just to say the Titans offense is not great, but you still have to you still have to perform, obviously, especially against the run, because if Derrick Henry gets rolling, we can see what we saw in week 4 in that first half, where the Titans offense was just bludgeoning this Colts defense. But I do think the Colts have the right recipe to stop them. It's just you can't play on their terms. You have to play on your terms, which the Colts have done for a lot of this year on defense, but just didn't do last week and didn't do in that first half of week 4.
So you heard it here first. JaMychal Hasty is not Derrick Henry, everyone.
Well, actually, I don't know about that. I mean, he's got more yards per carry.
Like
At least against the Colts, he has more yards per carry.
Yeah, that's true. Now, for me in this one, a big thing is just making the adjustments and just kind of righting the wrongs from the first matchup.
Right.
The Tennessee game, I think, for both of us was one where we saw some like clear opportunities to take advantage that they just didn't seem to attack those areas. Mo Alley-Cox had a big game, which, we said over the middle of the field was probably going to happen. And I know when you talked to Tyler Rowland first, he said the same thing. But, like, the run game wasn't there. The running backs in the passing game didn't really seem to be a factor. So they clearly made adjustments from their first matchup with Jacksonville. And, they came out on top and they actually won. What can you do in this matchup to fix what you didn't do well or didn't do correctly or even attempt to do in week 4? I think we know they're very capable of winning this game regardless of whether or not it's on the road. But
yeah,
one thing that
I think is really interesting is, and I might get some flack for this, but I think one of the biggest issues the first time these two teams played was Shaquille Leonard. I think Shaquille Leonard just did not look comfortable whatsoever in Gus Bradley's defense when he was out there. He looked a little slow with his reads, and honestly, he just didn't look like he was playing very fast and loose. And once we saw Shaquille Leonard leave the game, it was 14-0. After that, the Colts gave up 10 points. The rest of the game, I think one of those touchdowns was on a really short field after a turnover. So the Colts defense played exceedingly well without Shaquille Leonard. So I'm curious to see if Shaquille Leonard does in fact play this week, which we really could see, his return to the field yet again against the Titans, if he's kind of looks like he did in that week 4 matchup, where, again, I'm not saying Shaquille Leonard's a bad player. It's just he didn't look like Shaquille Leonard, which is very understandable. He didn't look like himself, and I'm curious to see if he gets inserted back into that starting lineup this week, if we see some of those same issues that kind of hurt the Colts in that week 4 game.
Yeah, he gave up that passing touchdown where he just wasn't really in the right spot. And like you said, it's not because he's a bad player. It's just this is a new defense for him. That old defense was very instinctual and based. You can use your athleticism and instincts for it. This one, those linebackers have to think a little more.
Right.
That is an interesting point though. Like, do you bring him if he comes back? Do you bring him along slowly so he's not on the field giving up these things and he gets to learn a little more? Or that's interesting. Because he's one of those guys like a Buckner or Jonathan Taylor. You don't take them along slowly. You just throw them out there and let them do their thing. So that'll be interesting to watch. That'll be a good one. I think for my X factor in this, considering I think all they have to do is really shut down the run, is DeForest Buckner. I think Buckner, that was the game where he was hurt and was on a pitch count, right? In the first Tennessee game, I think.
Yes. Yeah, he barely played. Yeah.
That's right. So a fully healthy DeForest Buckner in this one, not on a pitch count. They need that against Derrick Henry. So he's my X factor. It always seems like there's some banged up, important defensive tackle for the Colts. It's usually Buckner. We thought it might be Grover Stewart, but it was just a rest day for him on Thursday. But no, I think Buckner, especially now that he's really humming and he's looking like himself, he's playing well in this defense. I think he's going to be my big X factor in this one.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, DeForest Buckner, again, they kind of held him out because they had that Thursday night game coming the next week, and it was really tough to just roll him out there. But these last 2 weeks, he's been phenomenal, and we've seen his play go up these last 2 weeks, so hopefully that carries into this game. My X factor is a guy who I think has been, honestly, I'd probably say the third most important defender for the Colts this year behind Stephon Gilmore and DeForest Buckner, and that's Rodney McLeod. Rodney McLeod has been great for this team. He's been great in pass coverage. He's been really aggressive coming up and filling against the run and also on those screens and quick passes. We saw him make a huge play against Travis Etienne on a screen play last week. We saw it back in week 4. He was unafraid coming downhill to hit Derrick Henry. So I really think Rodney McLeod is a guy who is big when it comes to playing against this team, because you need guys who are going to be confident and secure in their zones and in their reads, but also in that play action game, he's going to be your middle of the field defender. He's going to be that safety that's in the box. You need him to be aware of those crossers and those quick passes over the middle after the Titans go to their play action. So I think Rodney McLeod is my huge X factor, and hopefully he has as big a game as he did in week 4 against the Titans.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that one quite a bit. As much as the safety position is kind of in flux right now and very rotational, what we expect once Julian Blackmon's back, McLeod seems like he'll be the biggest constant.
Right. Absolutely, guys. So now coming up, we're going to talk about our final thoughts, our final game predictions, stuff like that about this matchup. But first, I want to tell you guys about our friends at Bet Online. This week's game might be a little enticing when it comes to some bets, guys. The Titans are 2-point favorites over the Colts with a total point over under of 42. Now, I don't know how you guys are feeling about this one. I mean, I'm sure you guys are riding the high of that Jacksonville win. So, if the Titans are favored by 2, maybe you go throw some money on the Colts. I'm not giving you advice. I'm just giving you a place to throw your money down, and that's Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting on football and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis of every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and even golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And thanks again for making Locked On Colts your first listen every day. Make sure you also check out the NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. Locked On's local experts give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games of the NFL weekend, including Sunday and Monday Night Football. Plus, betting advice from the field's leading experts, Bet Online. Follow NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. All right, Jake, let's talk about our final predictions and thoughts about this game. So, obviously, I have to do my thing, which people are going to like, but I have to do my thing to ensure the victory. So, Jake, I'll let you take it first here. What are your kind of thoughts? What's kind of the vibe going into this game for you?
Yeah, so I feel better about the Colts after these last couple games, but it feels like a really dangerous situation. Like, this team seems like one where as soon as you start to trust them again, they rip your heart right out. But with that said, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because of what they've done these last couple weeks. I'm going to say the offensive line is going to keep it up. They're going to play adequate football. And because of that, which offensive line play, I think would have been their biggest X factor throughout all of this season so far, I'm going to give them the 23-20 win. It could be a bigger margin, but the Titans know how to beat the Colts. Like, they've shown it every time. Their defensive front plays violently against the Colts. They match up really well with that Colts offensive line, so I absolutely give them a chance. Wouldn't be shocked at all if they win, even comfortably. But I'll give the Colts the nod, 23-20.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting matchup because I do think, again, like I said in week 4, I think on paper, a lot of things do skew towards the Colts winning this one. But the 2 things that give me a little bit of pause. One, I have to see it again from this offense. I really want to be happy about this offense. I just don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to get hurt. I'm a little closed off right now. I'm like, it's like getting
your
out
heart
of a bad
is
relationship.
shut down.
Right. Because we came into this year with high expectations for this offensive line and this offense, not the offensive line, but the entire offense. We got Matt Ryan, we got Alec Pierce, Jonathan Taylor's the best running back in football. I was so pumped coming into the season for, we said on our bold predictions before the season started, you said this was going to be a top 10 offense, and I was like, yeah, I can see it, I totally see it, and they just ripped our heart out. It was an abusive relationship from the beginning of the season. It was just, we literally saw them just limp their way. I don't even know if limping is, they were crawling their way through those first couple of weeks. This offense was an absolute train wreck, an abject disaster. I can just keep going on and on with that stuff. But last week was like the one sign of hope. I was like, oh yeah, okay. this is the offense I expected. But I don't want to. I just don't want to hope too much right now, because I know what that does in football. I know when you hope too much, and I know with trends. Again, historically, Frank Reich's offenses perform like we just saw this past weekend. But it is kind of weird that we saw 5 weeks of terrible play and then 1 week of really good play. Like, which one should I believe in more? So I'm not fully there on the offense yet. I want to see it one more time, and I think this is the perfect opportunity. And the other thing that scares me is, the Titans are coming off of a bye week. And this is for first place in the division. I mean, if the Titans win this, I don't want to say that they win the division outright already, but they kind of really get that inside track. Like, if they win this game, the Colts will have 3 losses in the division. Jaguars and Texans don't really look like they're going to factor too much into that. So it looks like it's the Titans division to lose if they win this game. And they know that if they lose this game to the Colts, it's kind of a 50-50. It could go either way with these two teams. So the Titans are really playing for something. Obviously, the Colts are as well, but the Titans are coming off a bye, getting a little healthier. They're playing for something. I think that is a little bit scary. But, if I were doing a real prediction, I would say some form of the Colts winning. Although I have to keep up my trend. I am 0-6 this year in doing predictions on this podcast. 0-6. I have yet to get one right, but the last 2 weeks I did figure that if I just start picking against the Colts will win every time. So my official prediction is Tennessee Titans 27, Indianapolis Colts 17. I guess I had to do some kind of pessimistic explanation here. Derrick Henry runs crazy, and the Colts offense reverts back to their old ways. But no, that's going to be my prediction I'm going with, because I need to stick to my 0-6 record. I need to hopefully get that to 0-7. So I'm going to go 27-17 Titans over Colts. I
like it. And if I remember correctly, I think on a crossover, Tyler made it. He made his pick 27-21 Colts. So a Titans person picked the Colts to win as well. I'm going to throw one more wrinkle in there that I just thought of. A storyline that I'm rooting for. I want Jonathan Taylor to go nuts. I want him to outgain Derrick Henry by at least 75 rushing yards. Because we know what Jonathan Taylor can do. Right. But these Titans fans, they've got a lot of ammo in their argument. I want Jonathan Taylor to go bonkers. What kind of storyline are you rooting for in this one?
I think that's a good one there. I just want the storyline to be the offense continues what they did against the Jaguars. That's the only storyline I'm really rooting for there. But Jake, just to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, just because we have a couple minutes left in the show, and I don't know how many of you guys are still listening. I look at the analytics. I know not many of you guys are still listening at this point, but
all of you are still listening.
Right. But since we didn't do a show for Wednesday, and then you did the crossover, I haven't had a chance on a podcast to talk about Jim Irsay and Dan Snyder.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to talk about it, so I want to talk for a second about this. I'm in a really unique situation where I, born in Virginia, live in Virginia still, was a big Washington fan my whole life. The first team I covered in the NFL was Washington, Locked On Redskins, which is now Locked On Commanders. That was my first paying job in the industry. So I'm very, very familiar with the Washington football team and everything going on over there. And I think it's absurd to me that I'm seeing so many things where people are comparing Jim Irsay's transgressions that happened over a decade ago to the things that Dan Snyder has done. I mean, Dan Snyder has sued season ticket holders during the recession and stuff like that. He has had the cheerleader scandal. He's had the workplace harassment scandal. He's had really messy fallouts with guys like Scott McLuhan and Bruce Allen, which I don't care about Bruce Allen, but stuff like that. We've seen Dan Snyder's been at the heart and center of so many allegations and scandals. I mean, he's hiding out on his yacht to avoid a Congress, Congress talking to him. How is that even somewhat comparable to someone who had a prescription drug addiction over 10 years ago, who's been very open and honest about all of that, and has, by and large, since then, just kind of been a goofy, fun fan that's interacted with other fans and done a lot of giveaways and charities. I mean, Kicking the Stigma is a phenomenal thing. And I'm not trying to come on here and kind of go to bat for billionaires. It's just not what I do. They don't need me going to bat for it, but I just wanted to say this on the podcast because, it's something I want to get out there is Jim Irsay is a guy I respect. I think he's done a lot of good for the Indy community, and he's someone where when he comes out and he's honest about something like that, I just really respect him jumping up and saying something about Dan Snyder, because I know personally not personally, like I don't know him, but I just know firsthand what it's like to be, around an organization with Dan Snyder, and it's terrible. So Jim Irsay, man, major props for everything he said. And I just wanted to say that here on the show because it takes a lot of guts to say that against a fellow owner, because they're kind of in that boys club together. So I was really happy to see Jim Irsay kind of step up and say that about Dan Snyder.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I'm actually glad you said something because you do have that unique perspective covering Snyder's teams for so long. But yeah, I mean, Irsay just that was courageous of him to do that with all the other owners. You hear stuff about some of these like superstar owners all the time, like for instance, Jerry Jones telling Robert Kraft not to F with him and stuff. Like it gets sticky sometimes,
Right.
And all of Jim Irsay's dirt is out there. But he's also like dedicated a lot of his life to like helping those causes, kicking the stigma with mental health. I don't even know how much he's put into substance abuse.
Right.
Shoot, like he's his daughters are like in his ownership group with him of this team, which is an anti thing going on with the Commanders and the environment Snyder has bred over there. So those two aren't comparable. Like I understand outside fans have this certain view of Irsay, but it's very uneducated. It's you're going off stuff about someone from 10, 15 years ago. And I mean, no one I'm sure wants to be judged off of how they were that long ago,
Right.
So,
right. Last thing I want to say about that is like, again, addiction is something that a lot of people in this country and this world deal with, and I'm not trying to absolve anything that Jim Irsay did. Obviously he learned from his mistakes. He went through some really dark moments, but man, comparing addiction and a lot of self kind of harm type stuff and self-abuse thing that he was kind of going through with his addiction to all the scandals that, I mean, look at everything that's involving like workplace harassment of women, the cheerleader scandal. I mean, it's so many things that are just awful about Dan Snyder. They're not comparable to someone that was struggling with addiction. So we got to stop that comparison. Jim Irsay is not a saint. He'll be the first one who will tell you that. But, I respect him for coming out and being honest and saying, look, if you have dirt on me, so be it. Like I have gone through my living hell.
Yeah.
So major respect to Jim Irsay for everything that he said about Dan Snyder. And he was 100% right about all of it.
Could not have said it better. Thank you for bringing that up. That is it for us, everyone. The next thing to check out off the list is the game itself. So stay tuned with us on social through the game and then right after, of course, for our initial reactions.
Yeah, make sure you guys follow us on social media at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at Locked On Colts, all on Twitter. Also subscribe to our shows on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again for making Locked On Colts your first listen every day. Now make your second listen to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you guys on Sunday.